The glossy pages of the Morrison Family Quarterly lay spread across Aunt Sarah's mahogany dining table like evidence of everything I supposedly wasn't. 4 pages of family achievements, full-color photos of cousin promotions and business acquisitions, and not a single mention of my work with the State Department. As you can see, Aunt Sarah announced to the gathered family, this quarter's newsletter showcases the real achievers in our family tree. I sat at the far end of the table, nursing my coffee while relatives I saw 3 times a year flipped through pages celebrating everything except my career. The Morrison family's quarterly gathering had become a ritualistic display of who mattered and who didn't, with Sarah's newsletter serving as the official scorecard. Look at this spread on Marcus, my cousin Jennifer gushed, pointing to a 2-page feature about my cousin's latest restaurant opening. 3 locations now. That's what I call building an empire. Marcus beamed from his position near the head of the table, his new Armani suit catching the afternoon light. The Michelin reviewers are already talking about the fusion menu. We're looking at serious recognition next year. And Diana's real estate portfolio, Sarah continued, flipping to another glossy section. 15 properties across 3 states. That's generational wealth building, not just a job. Diana nodded while adjusting her diamond tennis bracelet. The market's been incredible. Last month's acquisitions alone will generate more passive income than most people's salaries. The implicit comparison hit its mark. While Diana collected rental income from luxury properties, I collected a government salary that seemed impossibly modest by Morrison family standards. Of course, Sarah said with theatrical sympathy, not everyone has chosen the entrepreneurial path. Some family members have settled for steadier options. Her gaze swept past me with practiced dismissal. For 5 years I'd been attending these gatherings while working my way up through diplomatic channels, currently serving as Deputy Assistant Secretary for European Affairs. But to the Morrison family, government work was synonymous with playing it safe and lacking real ambition. Emma's doing fine with her government position, my mother said defensively, though her tone suggested embarrassment. Stable work, good benefits. Not everyone needs to be a business owner. My stable work involved managing diplomatic relations between the United States and 15 European nations, briefing senior officials on international crises, and coordinating policy responses that affected millions of people. But because it didn't generate visible wealth, it was dismissed as career mediocrity. Government work is perfectly respectable, Jennifer agreed with false sincerity. It's just not newsletter material, you know? Our readers want to hear about achievement and innovation, not administrative positions. Marcus raised his wine glass in a toast. To family members who take real risks and build actual wealth. That's the Morrison legacy. The toast felt like deliberate exclusion, celebrating everyone except the family member who had chosen public service over private profit. My secure phone buzzed in my jacket pocket, a priority flash message indicating urgent diplomatic communications. The timing couldn't have been worse, with my family already convinced that my government work was unimportant enough to interrupt at will. Let me guess, Marcus said, noticing me check the device. Another urgent government memo? Maybe someone needs you to update a filing system. The mocking tone drew chuckles, none of them realizing that the memo was actually an emergency communication from NATO headquarters about rapidly developing security threats. I stepped onto Sarah's stone terrace to read the encrypted message, my heart racing as I processed the severity of what was unfolding across Eastern Europe. Russian military exercises had shifted into suspicious positioning near NATO borders, and intelligence suggested possible preparation for territorial probes that could trigger Article 5 responses. My secure phone rang immediately. The caller ID showed Sextate, the Secretary of State calling directly. Emma, thank God I reached you, Secretary Williams's voice was tense. We need you at the emergency G7 session immediately. The intelligence assessment suggests coordinated Russian action across multiple frontiers. Madam Secretary, I can be in DC within 2 hours, I replied. Negative. We're convening an emergency session at Camp David. Marine One is en route to your location for immediate transport. The President specifically requested you for the European response coordination. My blood ran cold. Presidential-level crisis management meant this situation had escalated far beyond routine diplomatic concerns. Emma, one more thing, Secretary Williams added. NATO's Supreme Allied Commander will be joining via secure link. Your assessment of European political responses will directly influence military planning decisions. I could hear my family's laughter from inside, still celebrating restaurant reviews while their dismissed relative was being summoned to coordinate international crisis response with heads of state. I returned to find Sarah displaying the newsletter's back page, which featured a family tree highlighting notable achievements that conspicuously omitted my diplomatic career. Sorry, I said, approaching Sarah directly. I need to leave immediately. Something urgent has developed that requires my presence in Washington. Sarah frowned, clearly annoyed. Emma, whatever government paperwork you think is urgent can surely wait until Monday. We're celebrating family success here. Marcus laughed dismissively. Let me guess. Some bureaucratic emergency that requires immediate attention? The thrilling world of government administration never rests. Before I could respond, the distinctive sound of helicopter rotors began echoing across Sarah's estate grounds. The noise grew progressively louder as military aircraft approached her exclusive neighborhood. What in the world? Diana said, looking toward the sky where Marine Corps helicopters were clearly visible approaching the estate. Sarah looked genuinely bewildered. I didn't arrange any aerial entertainment. Whose helicopters are those? The aircraft touched down on Sarah's pristine lawn, and I recognized the distinctive markings of Marine One support aircraft. Secret Service agents emerged first, followed by a Marine colonel I recognized from National Security Council briefings. The family gathering had gone completely silent as the military delegation approached the terrace with purposeful authority. Deputy Assistant Secretary Morrison? The Marine colonel called out. Yes, Colonel, I replied, stepping forward from my dismissed position at the table's end. Ma'am, we have immediate orders from the President. You're needed for emergency G7 coordination regarding the developing European crisis. NATO allies are requesting immediate diplomatic response. The words President and NATO allies seemed to echo across the silent terrace, causing my family's expressions to shift from confusion to complete bewilderment. Sarah stared at the military officers, then at me. The President? Emma, what exactly do you do for the government? The Marine colonel looked confused. Ma'am, doesn't your family know about your position? Deputy Assistant Secretary Morrison coordinates all European diplomatic relations for the State Department. Marcus had gone completely pale. European diplomatic relations? Emma, you told us you worked in international affairs, but we thought. You thought I filed paperwork, I finished. Because none of you ever asked for details about my actual responsibilities. A Secret Service agent stepped forward, speaking into his radio. Copy that. Presidential aircraft approaching for diplomatic personnel extraction. Civilian area secured. My family watched in stunned silence as federal security protocols were implemented around Sarah's dining room where they'd been celebrating restaurant openings and property investments. Furthermore, the Marine colonel continued, addressing my bewildered relatives, Deputy Assistant Secretary Morrison has been managing the current European crisis for the past week. Her diplomatic assessments have prevented 3 potential NATO incidents from escalating to military responses. He pulled out an official State Department communication device. Ma'am, I have Secretary Williams on secure line. She needs to brief you during transport about the President's diplomatic instructions. The device activated and Secretary Williams's voice filled Sarah's elegant terrace. Emma, the situation has deteriorated since our last call. German Chancellor and French President are requesting immediate consultation on coordinated response to Russian positioning. Diana's wine glass slipped from her hand, shattering on the stone terrace. Secretary Williams continued, unaware of my family's shock. The President wants you personally handling the NATO coordination calls. Your relationship with European foreign ministers is critical for alliance unity during this crisis. Sarah found her voice first, though it came out as barely a whisper. Foreign ministers? Emma, you know foreign ministers. The Secret Service agent consulted his tablet. Ma'am, we have confirmation that German Chancellor and French President are standing by for your assessment. The G7 emergency session begins in 90 minutes. Marcus looked like he might be physically ill. The German Chancellor? Emma, we had no idea you worked with world leaders. Deputy Assistant Secretary Morrison coordinates directly with heads of government across Europe, the Marine colonel explained. Her diplomatic rank requires Senate confirmation and direct presidential appointment. She's one of the highest-ranking diplomatic officers in the European Bureau. Jennifer stared at me with complete disbelief. Senate confirmation? Presidential appointment? Emma, why didn't you tell us? I tried, I replied, moving toward the helicopter. Every time I mentioned my work, you dismissed it as government bureaucracy and changed the subject to restaurant reviews. As Marine One lifted off from Sarah's estate, the Morrison Family Quarterly newsletter lay scattered across the terrace, its celebration of restaurant chains and real estate portfolios rendered absurdly insignificant in the context of international crisis management and presidential diplomatic missions. My secure communication device buzzed with messages from NATO headquarters, the German Foreign Ministry and the French Élysée Palace. Each notification represented the weight of international diplomacy that I'd been handling while my family mocked my career choice. Ma'am, the Marine colonel said, handing me a briefing folder marked Top Secret/Eyes Only, the President will want your diplomatic recommendation before the G7 session begins. When I returned to the family, if I returned, everything would be different. They could never again exclude me from their success narratives or suggest that government work was somehow inferior to business ownership. The presidential summons, the NATO coordination, the direct access to world leaders, all of it was now undeniably real. The helicopter carried me toward Camp David, where the President and G7 leaders were waiting for diplomatic assessments that could determine the future of Western alliance structures. Behind me, my family was left to process the reality that their government clerk was actually one of the most important diplomatic figures in the Atlantic Alliance. They had wanted newsletter-worthy achievements, never realizing that real achievement sometimes required security clearances that prevented public recognition. While they worried about social media content, their excluded relative was quietly maintaining the international order that made their comfortable lives possible.